There are 16 teams looking to become Stanley Cup champions. The goal to get there is simple. Win 16 more games. Easier said than done. Johnny Talk Sports here to bring you my 2019 NHL Stanley Cup Playoff Predictions. This is one that some of you looked forward to. I thought about waiting until tomorrow to do this because I thought I need some more time to look at some of the matchups. But I'm ready to go tonight. And before we get into it, please be aware that I haven't seen that much hockey this season because with the NHL, NBA, MLB, the regular seasons are just too long for me to get into. But once the playoffs hit in any of those sports, I'm just locked in. I'm planning on watching as much of this Stanley Cup playoffs as I possibly can. I'm not going to be able to see every single minute though, but I will see as much as I possibly can. So let's get right into it. I'm ready to go. I hope you're all locked in because these can be some good predictions. So we're going to start off on the Western Conference side of this NHL playoff. First with the Calgary Flames and the Colorado Avalanche. Now I don't really watch much hockey, but when the Avalanche seem to be in the playoffs, they seem to win maybe a game or two and then get eliminated. At least that's how it's been in recent memory. And I think this is going to be a history repeats itself moment. I think the Flames, they move on and win it in 5 games. Next we have the San Jose Sharks and the Vegas Golden Knights. I think this is going to be the best series out of all of them. I think it's going to be a down-to-the-wire moment. Wouldn't surprise me if we saw a multiple amount of games in this round, like 2 or 3 games, go into overtime. I could easily see this series being dictated in overtime. And that's another thing I like about the NHL playoffs, is they keep going. They don't settle for shootouts in the playoffs. It's golden goal. They go for a golden goal and then call it good. And that's what I like about the NHL playoffs, is all the games are intense. Anything can happen. They have exciting endings. And that's something I look forward to. That's what I'm going to look for in this series. But I think the Vegas Golden Knights, they're going to start a redemption story. They're going to start a redemption story, obviously. But can they finish the final chapters of the redemption story? I think the Vegas Golden Knights pull off a stunner in San Jose in Game 7. Knights in 7, moving on to the Nashville Predators and the Dallas Stars. I think this is also going to be a good series. For the Stars to win this series, they're going to have to score goals to support Ben Bishop. Ben Bishop has the best save percentage out of all goalies in the National Hockey League this season. And for the Stars to win the series, they got to get goal support for him. I like the goaltender matchup in this series between Pekka Rinne and Ben Bishop. However, I just can't see the Stars getting enough goal support in a 7-game series for Ben Bishop. I think the Predators move on, but it's going to take all 7 games to get it done. I have this going all the way to a Game 7 with the Predators pulling it out in Nashville. Predators in 7. Although something tells me I'm going to regret not picking the Stars. If the Stars end up winning this series, pulling off the upset, just say that I kind of told you so. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Stars, if they did winning this series, how it would happen. Would it be because they scored a lot of goals to support Ben Bishop? Or did Ben Bishop put the Dallas Stars on his back? Because that's what we saw with Pekka Rinne a couple of years ago. When the Predators, they were a wild card team and they swept the Blackhawks. And Pekka Rinne only allowed 2 goals in 4 games for the Predators. So we'll see if Ben Bishop has something similar to that, because he's got the potential to do it, because he's leading the NHL in save percentage. But Predators in 7. Moving on to the Winnipeg Jets and the St. Louis Blues. I think this could be a good series as well. However, the way I see it, I think the Blues, they have some momentum, because earlier in the regular season, the Blues making the playoffs wasn't that realistic. And now the Blues are here, but sometimes just being in the playoffs is enough momentum. I like the Blues to move on in, you guessed it, 7 games. So that's 3 playoff series that we've previewed in a row that are going to 7 games. So now we're moving on to the Eastern Conference side of things. First, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Columbus Blue Jackets. the Tampa Bay Lightning, they seem to be the predominant favorite to win the Stanley Cup. And I think they're going to make quick work out of the Blue Jackets. Although Sergei Bobrovsky, he has had 9 shutouts this season, which is leading the NHL among goaltenders. So we'll see if Sergei Bobrovsky can put the Blue Jackets on his back. But I think the Lightning are going to be too much for the Blue Jackets. I have the Lightning sweeping the Blue Jackets, turning them into mincemeat, moving on to the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. It seems like almost every single year that these two teams are meeting in the first round. I know it's kind of systemed where a lot of these teams within your division where they always meet each other in the first round, but it seems like it's always these two teams every single year. So, and the Bruins seem to have the Maple Leafs number in recent memory. However, I think this is going to be a lot different. I think adding in John Tavares in the offseason is going to be a difference for the Maple Leafs in this series this time around. I think the Maple Leafs win this in 7 games and pull off the upset over the Bruins to move on against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Next, we have the Washington Capitals and the Carolina Hurricanes. It's been nearly a decade, maybe even more than a decade, since the Carolina Hurricanes were last in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And the Washington Capitals, the defending Stanley Cup champions. I've seen nobody else make this prediction yet, so I'm going to. The Carolina Hurricanes are going to upset the defending champions, the Washington Capitals, in 6 games. What better way to make your first appearance in the Stanley Cup playoffs in over a decade than pulling off an upset against the defending Stanley Cup champions? Now that would be something. And I am predicting it. The Carolina Hurricanes over the Capitals in 6 games. Next, we have the New York Islanders and the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is going to be a good matchup as well. The Penguins, they seem to look pretty weak and lackluster towards the beginning of the season, but they got some momentum, just like it is every single time when people doubt the Penguins. When they're at their lowest point, they start winning a couple games, getting some momentum, getting some confidence, and they're back in the playoffs, and a lot of the times they make it pretty deep in the playoffs, at least past the first round. And I think this is going to be one of those cases again. I think the Penguins, they move on against the Islanders in 6 games. So now we're on to the second round. We've got the Calgary Flames and the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think this is going to be a down-to-the-wire series as well. But I think the Calgary Flames, they move on to the conference final in 7 games. The Vegas Golden Knights will not be able to complete their redemption story. They won't be able to complete those final chapters. At least not yet. Maybe next year, but it won't be this season. I just feel like that Vegas is going to have to break down at some point because a lot of these teams do that. A lot of teams, when they fall just short, they either completely go against all odds, against all adversity, and end up winning it all, or they just fall apart and crumble. And this could be a case for the Vegas Golden Knights if we see this in a Game 7. I just think the Flames use home ice to their advantage in Game 7, and they move on to the conference final. Next, we have the Nashville Predators and the St. Louis Blues. And I think the Blues are going to run into some trouble here. I think the Predators, they move on in 5 games. I just think the Pekka Rinne just looks too good right now. Next, we have we're moving on to the Eastern Conference side for the second round. The Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think this could be an interesting series, although I think Tampa Bay's goal scorers, they have 3 players, maybe even 4, that have scored they have scored 40 or more goals this season. So they have multiple players that can score goals on you. And I think the Lightning move on against the Maple Leafs onto the conference final in 6 games. Next, we have the Carolina Hurricanes and the Pittsburgh Penguins. In this scenario, The Penguins are looking to redeem their second round Stanley Cup playoff loss last season to the eventual Stanley Cup champions, the Washington Capitals. And the Carolina Hurricanes are looking to upset the two-time Stanley Cup champions in the Pittsburgh Penguins, the back-to-back before Washington. So if the Hurricanes, if they can pull off another upset, they would have beaten the last three Stanley Cup champions. However, I don't see it happening. Although the Hurricanes, they will make you work. They will give your goalies a workout every single game. The Hurricanes are leading the National Hockey League. Well, they led the NHL in shot on goal differential throughout the regular season. So they will give your goalies a workout. I think Matt Murray's going to be tested. Although, I got to go with the experience over momentum. I think the experience of the Penguins will propel them to the Eastern Conference Final. So now we are on to the conference finals. We've got the Calgary Flames and Nashville Predators on the Western Conference side. We have the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Pittsburgh Penguins on the Eastern Conference side. So we're going to start off with the Western Conference. The Calgary Flames and the Nashville Predators. The Flames are looking to get to the Stanley Cup Final. The Predators, they're looking to redeem themselves from 2 seasons ago, where they made it to the Stanley Cup Final when they were a massive underdog and nearly got it against the Penguins, but a heartbreaker in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final 2 years ago. The Lightning, they're looking to get redemption after having 2 chances to win 1 game to get to last year's Stanley Cup Final, but got shut out by the Capitals in both Game 6 and Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And the Penguins, they're looking to get back to the Stanley Cup Final. So the Flames and Predators. I think this is going to be a good one. Although I think the Predators, they move on to the Stanley Cup Final. They win it in Game 6. They win it in front of their home ice. And they move on to the Stanley Cup Final, hoping to rewrite their unfinished chapters of redemption. And next, for the Eastern Conference Final, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Pittsburgh Penguins. This series would be epic. It's going to be a good one. You've got experience led by Crosby, Malkin, Phil Kessel. It seems like these are the 2 teams that are the predominant favorites to win the Stanley Cup. The Lightning, they were the most consistent team in the NHL this season. In fact, I was hearing they broke some records, they made some history. And the Penguins, they're always going to be a favorite to win the Stanley Cup for as long as Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and or Phil Kessel is going to be on that roster. But I just think that the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think that they are going to be motivated in this one. Because the Lightning, couple seasons, for the last 2 seasons, they have, 2 of the last 3, they have come so close to reaching the Stanley Cup Final, even winning a Stanley Cup at a point. And I think the Lightning, they're going to finally get it done. I think they're going to make the Stanley Cup Final. So now, we're now predicting the Stanley Cup Final between the Nashville Predators and the Tampa Bay Lightning. So here we go. Winning the 2019 Stanley Cup in 5 games, I think it's going to be the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, whenever I do these things, I try my best to not pick the favorite, because the favorite doesn't necessarily win all the time. They lose more often than they don't. But I think this one's kind of different. I just think the Lightning, I think they're going to be motivated in this one. Both these teams will be motivated in this one. But I just think the Lightning, I think that without a Stanley Cup, everything they've accomplished this season, making history, setting records, it's all going to go to waste. And I think the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think they're going to seize the moment, and they're going to hoist the Stanley Cup on their home ice in Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. So those are my Stanley Cup playoff predictions. Comment your predictions down below. Comment who you think is going to win the Stanley Cup. Also comment the Stanley Cup Final matchup. like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you next time. We'll see you later this week for the NBA playoff predictions and another mock draft. We're getting close to the NFL draft. I'll see you later. Have a good one.